All right, so before I get started, I'm just going to run through some of the supplies that I'll be using for today. So if you did sign up for the series, you will get access to the printable outline. So it's already ready for painting now. All you have to do is, if you have a printer at home that can print on cardstock, that is going to allow you to print this 5x7 design. So I like to pre-cut down my paper. If you can't, just print it in the middle and you can cut it down later, but I like to print mine on pre-cut to the exact size just for ease of I don't know, it's so much easier to do it before than to cut it later, but don't panic if you can't. And so this will definitely give you confidence and save you time in being able to paint from the start by having this printable outline. So if you need to do that later, go ahead. All you have to do is subscribe to the weekly watercolor tutorial series and you will get the outline. And you can access the replay both in the Facebook group and it'll be later up on my YouTube channel. Okay, so then when it comes to materials that I'll be using, I will be using a number 8 pointed round brush. This one's by Etcher, and it has a pretty good spring to the tip of the brush bristles. That's how I like to paint. It's synthetic bristles. All of these are synthetic bristles. The other one that I really love is a number 6 Winsor & Newton Cotman round brush, but it has just such a nice point to it, so I can get a really good detail with that, or a bigger stroke. And then lastly is my trusty 00 pointed round, just liner brush. I've had this for so long, I couldn't even tell you who it's by, but that is the brand. It's probably time for a new one. And then when it comes to the paint, I really am only going to use, gosh, very, very few colors. So all the dog portraits that I'm doing in this Dog a Day challenge are using pretty much only like 8 different colors. So Payne's Gray, brown, a yellow ochre, and some type of gold, any type of burnt brown, orange color, and then a red. And I have a little bit of an orange, which is nice for this under part of the tongue, but you don't need it. And then last but not least is for the details. So like all these little white hairs that you see that come over the top of the mouth there. I use Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, but you can use any white gouache. Anything that's opaque. You can't use a white watercolor unless it's an opaque watercolor, meaning that it can lay over top. So acrylic is kind of what we're most used to. I don't use acrylic, I use a water-based opaque paint. So like I said, this one or a white gouache. But all right, so as long as you have your water cup, your water jar, and your paints, just gonna scoot this over a little bit so I have a little more room, you are good to go there. And I'm using a tube paint by Winsor & Newton, and these are just my favorite paints to use, but I also have another favorite palette, is this Winsor & Newton Cotman pan set. And I actually have a few of these that if you do need some paints, I highly recommend it. So just send me a message and I can get these for you. All right, so to get started, this painting should take us about an hour or so, maybe a little bit faster. So at any time, I would revisit this video if you want to paint this again, and you'll be able to pause it and slow down in case I go a little too fast during the live, but feel free to ask any questions if you have any. Let me see if I can get this open here. All right, so to start, this dog looks fairly light tan in areas, so going to start really light wash of the yellow ochre, and it's kind of a muted, we don't want it super yellow, so even adding in a little bit of a brown to that is going to bring it more of a natural color. So mostly water, just the tiniest little bit of paint. This is actually going to be probably too much, so I'll start with the ear because I always start with the ears. You can't really mess those up. So I'll just lay in that first layer is what we're doing. I'm going to get rid of some of that paint. So all I did was dab it in my water cup and onto my paper towel. So I'll start by doing that, and I see another tan mark here. So I'm just laying in some blocks of color, and definitely above the nose wrinkle here, maybe above the eye. So I'm just using that really light wash and working around the dog first, and leaving some of these really bright areas pretty white. So there's just a patch here, down around the eye here, up above, kind of on the side of the head. And now I'm running out, so I'll just grab some more of that wash. When you grab more of that wash, I always recommend starting in an area that looks a little bit darker. So down around the neck here, I'll add some more. And then this is what we'll just use to continue to build from. So I need to mix up a little bit more. Let's see, we need some kind of around the mouth area, so just add some right here. And even though that doesn't look like the most graceful paint swatch there, I will then get rid of that paint on my brush, and then I'll use that to help blend and smooth it out. And I didn't mention when I first started, the paper I'm using is it's Arches, and it's a 140-pound cold press, and it's truly one of my favorite papers to use for pet portraits. Anything, especially that I'm doing for a commissioned portrait, custom portrait, I always use top-notch paper. It'll just make everything turn out so much nicer in the end. There's a few things you can get away with at the student grade level, but when it comes to paper, you definitely want to invest in some good paper if you're doing it more than just practice. So again, I'm just using that wash. This is our first layer. Maybe add one more little bit into the ear up here. The ear's actually got hints of gray in it, so just kind of do it in that swatch right there. Maybe I'll add just the tiniest little bit just to help give the forehead dimension. So you always want to, it looks so light you probably can barely see that little swatch, but you always want to paint in the direction of the hairs to help sculpt the face. Okay, so from here, I think it would be really helpful if we start to add in more color to the ears. So especially this left ear is going to be pretty dry because we didn't put a lot of water or paint in. This is going to be a mixture of any brown you have with a Payne's gray. It's going to give you that grayish brown color. And the reason I use Payne's gray versus black is just because it just creates more of a rich color that seems a little more unexpected than it would be if you had black. And then I am going to use the very tip of my brush. If you don't have a pointed round brush, I would recommend switching to something that is smaller. So with just little baby strokes, I'm going to just kind of show the little direction of the hair in here, almost like we're drawing, and then begin to show that definition of where the head overlaps the ear. And then kind of doing that is all we need. I'm going to start again. This time I'm going to add a little more Payne's gray. It was a little too brown. But I don't have a ton of paint on my brush here. So there's a pretty dark area on this top side of the ear. So I'll just paint that in there. And remembering that I can always get rid of the paint on my brush if I want to leave a little bit of a a lighter spot and then push that paint around. And then there's a really light shadowed area here. And then as I continue to paint the dog, I'll go back and revisit some of these areas that need to have a little more depth. So I'm just sticking with the ever so slight color I have on my brush. And I am going to, if you don't have enough color in your brush, you can pick up a little bit, but I recommend blotting it onto your paper towel first, because you want it to look very light like this. And now I'm just working on some of the areas where that wrinkle is. So I'll just do some there. And then there's one kind of around the nose. This is just the first layer, so we'll definitely go back through and really highlight those wrinkles. Kind of do some around the eye here. I'm leaving the eyes until I have some of the shape in. There's even some on the top of the head, kind of how this is where the shadow is happening, so it's even a little bit bluer. So I've just laid down quite a bit of paint there, but I'm going to massage it out with a clean brush. And then continue to kind of push that around, but that is where the first part of that shadowed forehead comes in. And then I'll continue with that color and then add some light areas down below here around the mouth. And then even down below the chin area, this part is going to be pretty dark. That's this area of the lip right here. And then now we need some more down in the lower half of the body. So again, brown and Payne's gray. So I'll just paint a little line there that's pretty dark. Get rid of some of that color, blot it on my paper towel, and then blend it out. And then there's a little bit of a wrinkle here on the chest. You can even do some strokes that look like hairs at this point. And so then I'm just continuing to add a kind of a light gray wash on this side of the face because it's definitely more on the shadowed side. You can even add a few little textured speckles around the nose area here. We might do a wash later over top, but for now that's what we'll do. And then blend that out because it gets a little darker on this side of the face. Okay, that looks good for the first wash. So now what I'll do is focus on the nose and then into the mouth area, still leaving the eyes for last just because they are truly the most important. So for this lower half of the nose, it's actually going to be a mixture of brown. If you have red, this would be a little bit of red added to it too to get a warmer brown. And then adding in the Payne's gray to that. So that'll give you a rich, kind of a grayish, a little bit of a red brown. And I'm just going to start to lay that in there. So just doing a few swatches like that. If it's too dark like that, I think I want to add even a little bit more red to it and brown. It's looking a little too gray to me. So now I'm just doing some color mixing right on the paper here. So if I have too much color, get rid of some of that, because now I can use what's on the paper and push that around. So I'm just going to continue to kind of push that. It's looking actually pretty red, but that's okay because we can lay in some of the dark color. I'd rather the lighter color first and then drop in the darker color later. And then just kind of blend it down into the lip area. And while that's still wet, I'll grab a little bit of that Payne's Gray and then just drop it in, and you'll see how that will start to expand. That. And once that dries, we'll be able to add in the tiny hairs that you see. But for now, that looks pretty good. You can even go ahead and use that Payne's Gray just to help outline the lip area. So while that is drying, I'm going to grab Payne's Gray only at the darkest that I can. So that just means a lot of paint, not so much water. And then being really careful, if this area got really wet, do not touch it. Mine isn't super wet, so I can get fairly close. It's not going to bleed. So just kind of get to know how much water you're using. And I'm just painting in that block of dark color above the tongue. So it's almost like drawing. That nice pointed round brush helps. So there's a block there, and then it kind of gets really dark on the side of the tongue. There's some dark areas below the tongue. So we're just painting in the shapes that we see. Just a little bit there. And a little bit more. So add a little more paint or water to my brush. And then just painting the top half there that I see. And then we'll blend that dark color into the tongue, but not yet. So I'm being careful, that is a tooth right there, to not paint that. So I'm just kind of leaving little areas that I want to turn into that pink color. So there's like a little dip there. And then we can even outline this area here. And then I'll go ahead and get rid of all of that paint on my brush. Pick up some of that red that we might still have left over from our nose area, and that I'm going to lay in first on this lip. You can even leave some little white patches to show reflection areas. And then I'll pick up the Payne's Gray and I'll start to drop that in. I just didn't want that to be a flat one color. So just dropping it in areas like that. Mine might have gotten a little too dark. So I'll take my clean brush and just pick some of that color back up. So I'm just soaking it up. What will also help is when we go back to add in the little white highlighted hairs, that will help make it look a little more realistic. But for now, this is looking pretty good there. Let's see, so at this point we can add in ever so slight light pink areas. So I'm just going to drop in a little bit of color. It's okay if it blends in with the other dark colors that we just did, makes it look a little more natural. And then from here, I am going to clean my brush completely and then pick up a little bit of the red. I think I'll start only with the pure red color that I have. If you need to, add a little orange. That'll make it look a little more pink. So I have too much on my brush right now. I'm just going to get rid of it and continue to just add in that first layer. The tongue does a funny little curve here. So again, I'm just laying in that first block of color. Doesn't need to be perfect. And then once this dries, I'll be able to add in more of that depth of the under part of the fold of the tongue. Okay. It's really nice that if you catch it before it dries to take some of that Payne's Gray and let's just paint a line down the middle and let that blend and bleed however it needs to. You can even drop in some Payne's Gray in areas that are a little bit darker, like on the side here. And that looks pretty good for now. I'm going to leave the tongue and just let that be while that dries. So I'm going to switch over to my medium-sized brush. I'm just moving like 2 sizes down, just so I have a little more control over the nose area. So I am picking up quite a bit of Payne's Gray. And I love this brush because that point is so fine. So I can use it to help outline the outside of the nose first. And then maybe even that little line that kind of goes down the middle there. And then the outside areas. And then I want to paint the nostrils, so I just picked up more Payne's Gray. It's almost like drawing. So we're just going to draw the shape, the dark shape of those nostrils first. Something like that. And then I'll go ahead and get rid of most of that paint on my brush. It's ever so slight on my brush, and I will paint in lightly around those areas that we just did. Maybe you don't need any because you'll pick up some from the outer edge, but we're just laying in a really light color for now. Sometimes I'll help reshape it and just paint the outer edges again. So something like that. It's not done, but it is, there's not much to it right now. And actually, while I have that brush and that color still in my hand, I'll just do little tiny strokes. If you need to switch to a smaller brush, this would be the time. But I'm just doing tiny little strokes right now. And get rid of some of that paint because now I just want to kind of blot it. This is just to show the texture on the front part of the nose. So we don't want to cover it up completely, but just to show some of that red color come through. Pick up some more. And kind of hold your brush in different ways to get different directions. So something like that. Just grabbing more Payne's Gray because now I can really start to show some of those wrinkle creases. So there's one there and there. And then one that kind of goes along the mouth there. You can even add a few more hairs. Anytime you feel like it was too much, I'd just get rid of that and get a clean brush, and then you can just kind of pat it to help soften those areas. Do the same thing on this side. So right now I'm just doing little hairs. And then we'll pat it down. And that was way too much. So I'll grab my other brush. And it's dry and I'll just soak it back up. Alright, so from here, I think it would even be helpful to grab some brown, because there's some brown areas above the nose there, and as it kind of works its way to the right hand side here. So it's not just one color, just kind of soften those. Grab some more of that brown, show some of those hairs that work their way around the eye. And above the eye, I'm just going to grab a little more. And then, let's see, I think that's looking really pretty good. If you have any excess on your brush, you can just kind of rub it out in some of the areas that need it more. I do see another area, so I'm just picking up a little more of that brown. And again, I just have such a nice pointed tip to this brush, so I'm just continuing on with this one. And I just want to show the direction of the hairs, so I'm just doing little tiny strokes. And then as I go up, I'll start to shape it so the hairs go like this around this eye and then this direction on this forehead. So we don't want to do it all over. I'm just going to do it in small patches. So I'll do a few up top here to help hide that outline and give the head a little definition. And then do some going this way. Some on that side. So something like that for now. So we're getting really close to getting to the eyes. I just want to go back and finish the tongue now that it's drier. So I'm going to actually pick up some of the orange that I have. If you don't have orange, if you have just a burnt orange brown, that'll work too. Mix that with some red. But I'm just going to take that bright orange and paint it underneath the tongue here. And on this side to kind of show that little flip of the tongue. And then let's see, it kind of folds, and I might even add some going towards the back. And on this side, maybe one down the middle. And now grab your red and even mix a tiny bit of Payne's Gray with it, so that was too much. But mixing the Payne's Gray with the red gives me like a really dark purple. So with that thin line, we'll kind of show that crease down the middle there. And I would say let's just kind of help show that area, so I just darkened it. And then around the tongue, and even in the back here, I just dropped in a little more of that color. Let's get rid of most of that on our brush, and then I'm just going to blend it out on the left side of the tongue. But that's really all I'm going to do right there. Kind of looks like I lost that tooth in here, but because it shows enough highlights, I think that it's going to be fine. I'm not going to add it back in. If I needed to add it back in, I would use the bleed proof white at the end. Alright, so let's focus on the eyes. And I approach eyes differently for every portrait. It just kind of depends on how I'm feeling. So to start, since I can see a really definitive line that, outlines the eye, that's what I'm going to start with. So with my tiny 00 brush, and as small of a brush as you can use, you can even stick with a larger brush if you have a really pointed tip like this one. I'm just going to pick up a lot of Payne's Gray where it looks almost black, and a little bit of water. And I'm simply going to give myself a shape to work with. So just going to paint what looks like an eyeliner on this dog. So something like that. And then kind of showing this little pointed corner there. And then while I still have that on my brush, you can see that below the eye it's pretty dark. So I'll just kind of paint a few strokes coming off the eye. I just got rid of some of that paint so I can try and smooth it out. So it's too much water. If you ever need to use your paper towel, you can do that to blot it up. A lot of times I just use a brush like that. So all I did was really just smooth it out. I'll go back and pick up a little more of that Payne's Gray because there is a little bit of a thicker line there, and then even there's a little bit of a gap as that highlighted eyelid there. So I'll just paint another line. Now it's already starting to look more realistic now that we're painting in a little extra details there. So again, just fanning it out. And that is what I'll do for that eye. Let's do the same thing for the other one, just being careful not to touch your hand to that side. So if you need to pause and let that dry, go for it. I'm just going to hold my hand up, paint that there, and do a little line around the eye here. Any type of side profile like this or 3/4 profile is a little bit trickier when it comes to the shape because they're not the same shape, obviously. So just go slow if you need to. Just going to use up some of that paint to show the definition of that wrinkle there. And then down below, so I just have barely any. It's almost like a dry brush technique. Okay. So I'm going to switch to a little bit of a bigger brush and hop back over to the other eye. And you'll see in this portrait there's kind of a blue sheen to the eye because of the way the light is hitting it. So we could do that. Sometimes it looks a little too much, so I'm definitely not going to add in that much brown or that much blue. I'm going to start with kind of a gold brown color, so the yellow ochre, and you could add just brown to that. I have this burnt orange that I love for brown eyes, so I'm going to add a little more to that. And I don't have a ton on my brush, but I'm simply just going to do a little swipe of color on the outer edge because the pupils of the eye are pretty big. So something like that for now. And kind of the same on the other side. I'll simply just do it towards the top. Maybe a little bit on the bottom. Now I'm making a little bit of this up just based on my knowledge of pet portraits in the past, of kind of how the color sits. So while that is not dry yet, I'm going to hop back over to the other eye and grab Payne's Gray. And I'm definitely going to add it in a few pieces here that are really dark. Try not to touch the brown. If you do, that's okay, because then it will naturally blend, almost like an ombre. Get rid of some of that paint on your brush with water and dabbing it on your paper towel. And let's approach it slowly and start to push some of that color around. So again, I have too much. Just going to completely get rid of that color off my brush. And now I'll just continue to push that around. So it's okay that we lost some of that color. I'm leaving a highlight here. I might go back and fix that. It looks slightly funny. Maybe just kind of a little line through it. And I can always add in more later. If you ever need to pick some color up, just get a dry brush and you can soak some of that up. Just being really careful where you're controlling it because it could blend into what you just painted. Alright, I like the look of that eye. I'm ready for the left one, which is a little trickier. Let's start by adding a lot of the Payne's Gray, just a few dabs towards the bottom of the eye and some up towards the top here. Then I'll get rid of it and then I'll just use a little bit of water and paint that is on the paper and push it around. Looks like there's quite a highlight on the left side of the eye. So I can always, like I said, add it back if I like it or if I don't like it. But let's do that for now. Like I said, I'm definitely going to have to stand back and look at the painting. Just taking little black hairs around the eye. Adding some more towards the center because that's where the shadow is. Even on this one too, kind of lost it there. And even on the outside, painting in more of that pupil of the eye. Alright, so again, you can revisit this video. I recommend pushing pause as many times as you need during that part because the eyes are definitely the trickiest. But don't feel intimidated, just go slow. And then if you even wanted to, just take a different piece of paper, watercolor paper, and just practice the eyes alone, or print this out as many times as you need for just practice, because eyes with dogs definitely have similarities. So lots of practice will definitely help in all future pet portraits you do. At this point now, we are ready to work on just tiny details. So just taking that Payne's Gray and darkening areas that need to be darker. So those wrinkles, maybe down here by the mouth. This is definitely the fun part because it starts to all come to life. I'm even going to add some more to the ear over here. Just a few little hairs. And even maybe some above, because this is what's going to help define the body. Even though it appears pretty light, we just want to show a little bit of an outer edge. So eventually I'm running out of water, but I have still paint on my brush, and I kind of like that look because it's giving it more of a dry brush look. And it's light. So again, if you just use the point of your brush, because this dog does not have long hair, you want to work in shorter strokes. So it looks like there's quite a bit of darker areas over here. So this is where I get to continue to build that up. Just using whatever paint I have on my brush. Even some down below here in the chin. Yes, I hop all over the place. And I don't really have a good reason for that, besides that letting certain areas dry and then coming back to it. Alright, still time to add a little more depth to the right ear, so picking up not a ton of Payne's Gray, kind of that medium amount, and then going to add in tiny hairs on this side. And above here. On this ear. Because the ear kind of overlaps here, so we even have to do another little line here to show how that ear overlaps. can paint a few off the top. Anywhere that you feel like is a little too light, just go ahead and add a few little strokes to that. Let's finish the body before we go back and add any white details to our dog. That is almost done. So I'm going to start in the darkest area I see, which is this fold down below the chin and into the body. So with a little bit of Payne's Gray, I'm just doing a little bit longer strokes because this part of the hair is a little bit longer. But whatever I see for the direction of the stroke is the way that I'm going to paint it. Let's see, so we want to add a little more there. It's good to use different varying shades so that it looks a little more natural. Even some that direction. And then going up the side of the face there and the neck, just using that Payne's Gray to help define it, because this isn't a full portrait of the body. So I'll just do a few strokes to show hair. And I think it would be best to switch back to kind of a golden brown color to show hairs on the side where the light is hitting it. And that's probably a little darker than I needed, but I'm not worried because I'll go back through and smooth it out. So I'll get rid of that and just use my brush to help blend it in. Alright, so I originally had said the nose wasn't done. I'm pretty happy with it. I could get more detailed if I wanted by picking up the Payne's Gray and helping to define that center strip of the nose, maybe even showing some shadowed areas down and around the nostril area with the Payne's Gray, but it's better to kind of leave it lighter and some of those areas darker. So at this point we're really close, and I'm switching to my 00, and my favorite part of the painting is the white details. So I'm just gonna pull out just what I need. So you can re-wet this stuff, but it doesn't work as great as watercolor does to re-wet. So I really just try to not waste it and pull out what I need. So with a damp brush, I don't want to water it down too much, otherwise then it doesn't keep its opaqueness as much. So I'm just spinning my brush to get a nice pointed tip. So this is where we can add in some of those highlighted hairs. So just really soft, short strokes. It's a little tricky because you don't want too much water, but enough that it will help it blend and go smooth. So I'm just adding a little bit of hairs around the mouth there. You can even add some up around the nose and help blend in this patch. This is just where it really starts to make it look more realistic. Let's see, there's quite a bit of highlight right here that I lost, so I'll just paint it back in. Some that kind of go down here, and maybe some on this side, shows a little bit longer whiskers. Let's see, definitely some areas down below here, so just going to do a few little swipes around the mouth. And then let's see, we'll do some kind of showing the highlighted areas around the mouth here. I'm just doing ever so slight. There's definitely a highlight on the left side of the tongue. so we can paint those highlights in. And then even kind of just showing some down in the body is helpful, helping to differentiate some of those blocks of colors that we did to show more movement of hair. Doesn't have to be all over, just enough to kind of break up some of those dark colors. But this is looking really pretty great. So I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial so far. This is definitely one of many that I've been doing over the course of July and August. I've been doing a dog a day. Even though I technically have skipped a few days, I'm still doing them, and I'm just taking a little bit longer to get through it than I originally challenged myself to, but I'm almost getting there. I'm on day 20, I think 22 and 23 today. So I'm very close. There will be 31 dog tutorial paintings total once this is all finished, and then I'm putting together a guided ebook and video lessons. So just like this video lesson was, every dog gets that same type of tutorial, guided tutorial, and then the ebook will come with explanation on layering and what colors I'm using for every single dog, just to help give you a little extra confidence and that you don't have to start from scratch and guess. So that is coming out. I don't have a definitive date, but it should be coming out within the next month. And then there's also going to be some exciting products that will feature all the dog paintings that I've been working on. And last but not least, if you do want to do a whisker, I do see a little one there, I'd stick with your little pointed round brush if you have one. If you don't, I wouldn't do this part because you really need a tiny brush. But you can do little tiny whiskers, just real light, barely any water, just a little bit of paint. And you can paint some of those that kind of jet out from the face to show even more realism. So I could continue to work this, but I really am very happy with how this one is coming out. And I try to keep all of these tutorials within an hour's time. So these are all available for download. Every week I'll be live. It's going to vary from week to week what time I go live, and it's going to be completely random subject matter that I paint and teach. So next week is a live painting of a summer cocktail, and I'll have the whole list listed on my website where you can download the printed outline and come back anytime you need. This will be available in the Facebook group and as well as my YouTube channel. So thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you next week.